Snake Eye this, Snake Eye that. Tired of only hearing about fire stuff from a new set? Well, fear not, because during the Phantom Nightmare format in the OCG, there was a non-fire deck that was performing very well at a competitive level. This deck was known as Silent Force, and its name in the TCG is Voiceless Voice. Voiceless is a mid-range leaning control ritual deck with a collection of powerful tools, and is with no doubt the new best ritual deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Sorry, Drytron players. This introduction video to Voiceless will tell you what the new cards do and why they are good, in addition to showing a sample deck list and showing the basic one-card combos. If you want to see more content for both fire decks and non-fire decks moving into the Phantom Nightmare format, then consider aggressively pounding the subscribe button. But with no further ado, enjoy! The card that ties this entire deck together is Low, a card with 3 incredible effects. The first effect allows Low to be used as the entire tribute when ritual summoning, which makes ritual summoning in this deck very easy. The second effect is that if Low is summoned, we can place one of our continuous voiceless cards from our deck onto the field, and since this places and not adds, this plays into Jolan Lockbird really well. The third effect is that if we ritual summon a light dragon or warrior monster, we can summon Low back from the graveyard. We can't use that second effect again here because that is a hard once per turn, but this, along with one of the continuous voiceless cards, is what sets up the deck's resource loop. Barrier lets us search any voiceless card or Skull Guardian ritual monster every turn, which is huge for consistency, but it also has another very strong effect. While we control Low and a light ritual monster, the opponent can only attack our ritual monster, and none of our light attribute monsters can be targeted by card effects. Preventing targeting has been a massive bonus for decks throughout the history of the game. Voiceless gets access to this simply from its normal search spell. The other continuous card, Radiance, also has a useful search effect, but also has a destruction effect attached to it as well. Normally, trap cards are slow because you have to set them and wait a turn, but Low can place this card face up straight from your deck. Or you can just search it with a ritual monster with summoning, which is Skull Guardian. This card becomes a behemoth when Low is on the field, as it becomes a 4100 beatstick that can negate any card or effect once per turn, and this will usually be untargetable as well thanks to Barrier. Voiceless also uses an already existing ritual monster in Cerevis. This card is tied to the archetype and has a useful effect in the hand to stop hand traps like Impermanence and Veiler. Now, these are great, but what are we using to ritual summon our ritual monsters? The ritual spell is rather mediocre, but it does have a very strong graveyard effect that grants you longevity. The way we prefer to ritual summon in this deck is with another new voiceless card called Saphira. Saphira dumps the ritual spell to grave to then add one of our ritual monsters to hand. Then we can also banish Saphira from grave to perform a ritual summon. This is a much more efficient way of ritual summoning than having to use the ritual spell from hand every time. Saphira sending the ritual spell to grave is not only relevant because of the spell's effect in the grave, but also for another new voiceless card called Cerevis. It's a nice extender that can also tag into a ritual monster. Now that we have explained what all the new cards do and why they are good, here is an example deck list that I made. Since this deck can function from 1 and 2 card combos, you have a decent amount of room for tech cards. One difference we might see in voiceless decks is if they use the Nadia Servant engine with Maximus, or if they use the Diviner engine with Trias. The Maximus engine is 3 Servant and 1 Maximus, and you use Servant to dump cards like Arclight, Garura, and Entus, and you can even use it to search DD Crow with Shurig. The Diviner engine is when you use Diviner to dump Trias, and then use Trias to tribute Diviner to bring back Trias. In doing so, because it was tributed, the effects of Diviner can then trigger to summon Low from deck. At which point, because you then have a 1 and a 9, you could then choose to make Chaos Angel, which although could be destroyed in battle, would be unaffected by all monster effects. A card I like a lot in this deck is Odd Eye's Pendulum Graph. It's light dragon, so we can search it, and it can negate spell cards and effects. When it negates something, it summons an Odd Eyes from extra deck and goes to the Pendulum Zone. And it has a good effect in the Pendulum Zone that returns itself back to hand in the end phase, and lets you search a ritual spell. Speaking of ritual spells, Since our ritual spell mentions both Skull Guardian and Cerebus, we can quite effectively use pre-preparation of rites. Unlike in the OCG, we have 3 copies of Fenrir in the TCG. And Fenrir is nice here because that extra level 7 that you search can be used to tribute for a ritual summon. I have nothing too crazy in the hand trap lineup. For now, Droll seems nice at the start of the format, but that could change moving forward. Nibiru is another nice hand trap option, because if your hand is weird, it can be tributed to Ritual Summon. Other cards we have in the side deck are a bundle of nice going second cards, and then some strong cards for going first. Different Dimension Ground is quite nice against the Snake Eye decks, especially Fire King. The nice thing with Voiceless is that if you are building it on a budget, then you can ignore the expensive extra deck cards like SP, because the extra deck is not overly important. Okay, so now that we've gone over what the cards do, why they're good, and looked at a deck list, let's look at the basic one card combos. This is from just having Low. We're going to go ahead and normal summon Low. Low will search for Barrier. Then we can use Barrier. Barrier effect will search for Saphira. Then we use Saphira effect to discard, send the ritual spell, and to add a Skull Guardian to hand. Then at this point, we can use Saphira from grave to banish it, and use Low as the entire tribute via her effect, to then summon the Skull Guardian from hand. And we can now go Chainlink 1, this to search, and Chainlink 2, Low to come back from grave. Or you could do that the other way around if you want to chain block Bell. Then Low will come back, and then we have a few options to search here. We can search for Cerebus, for extra protection against targeting, or we could instead search for Odd Eyes if we want more follow-up, because we can scale Odd Eyes, and then in the end phase, Odd Eyes goes back to hand, and we search for another ritual spell for next turn. So this has 4100 attack, cannot be targeted, and is a negation for anything. And then this is a second one card combo, which is from just Diviner. So we're going to go normal summon Diviner. Diviner effect to send Trias, then the effect of Trias Engraved to tribute just for Diviner, and bring back Trias. Then we get the effect of Diviner to summon a level 2 or lower fairy from deck, which will be Low. Then the effect of Low to place the Barrier. Then effective Barrier to search. We'll grab Saphira. Then Saphira effect to pitch itself. And the spell to search for Skull Guardian. Then we're going to use the effects of Saphira Engrave to banish herself and tribute Low as the entire tribute. To summon Skull Guardian. And we're going to go Chainlink 1 Low, Chainlink 2 Skull Guardian, which will search for an Odd Eyes. We're going to bring back Low. So now we have our negation with Low and this on field. And in the end phase we can use Odd Eyes to go back to hand and grab a ritual spell. If we already had another ritual spell in hand, we could then use that to tribute for Trias and summon Odd Eyes from hand. So then we would have an Omni negate and a spell negate which could not be targeted. Or instead, you could do the same thing to end on Cerebus. So that your end board would look like this. So that your end board would then look like this, or it would look like this. But again, that is if you have an extra ritual spell in hand. If you had used a different spell in the turn already, you could use the other Cerebus to make IP. I'm looking forward to seeing how Voiceless Voice shapes up in the meta, especially when it gets even more good cards in the next set. Thank you all for watching, have a perfectly balanced rest of your day, and yeah, adios.